Sonic 1991 promotional comic. I'm guessing this will be extremely generic, right? Because it has Sonic in Green Hill Zone with classic Eggman and his Eggmobile behind him. That's an interesting cover, right? Oh look, even in a comic like this, they still call Sonic's world Mobius. Take that, weeaboos! Even the most obscure of Sonic continuities have the good sense to use the word Mobius. It's weird that the text box narration says, real fun place to live. So is this Sonic narrating? Because that's pretty informal. We see that Eggman's going after Sonic with the Wrecking Ball Eggmobile of Sonic 1. What is with the Sonic franchise and reusing this Eggmobile so much? Why can't it just reference literally any other Eggmobile from Sonic 1? Anyways, his Wrecking Ball hits the grass, and Sonic speeds away telling him to eat dirt as the comic for some reason feels the need to tell the audience that the events of the comic are purely fictional. You don't say! It's interesting that this comic was printed in Canada. So far the story isn't interesting at all, so let's hope it gets me to actually pay attention to it later. Sonic thinks that his friends are trapped inside those robots. I bet they won't actually be his actual friends though. He generically breaks some badniks as usual in one hit each, freeing nothing but generic animals. And he runs off a cliff and falls towards a bunch of spikes with no indication that there would be any way to save himself. I'm reminded of the first issue of SEC right now. But that issue was more interesting than this. It had Eggman have a giant ring vacuum, and he planned to use an engine that would pollute the atmosphere for 1,000 years. So what Deus Ex Machina will save Sonic from the spikes? Oh cool, someone other than Sonic is useful. Suddenly, one of the insignificant animals that Sonic saved, a rabbit, pushes a swinging platform over to Sonic out of nowhere and saves him from the spikes. And Sonic has the decency to thank him. That's nice. And I like how this makes more sense than him just bouncing off a badnik that was very conveniently right below him to survive the spikes. Instead, he's saved by a part of the region that he was already in. Then it's revealed that, yeah, this comic is really similar to Fleetway, because Sonic reveals to the civilians that Robotnik is Kintobor. And we see a brown Sonic meet Kintobor, after he accidentally burrowed into Kintobor's underground lab. Wait, first of all, why was he burrowing around randomly? Second, how could he just casually burrow through the metal floor of a building to get here? Where was he even headed? And why would Kintobor's lab be underground instead of above ground like every other building? This is very contrived writing. Well, at least it's interesting that right away, this very tame-looking generic Sonic story is establishing Kintobor and Sonic to have an origin story. So what was that about Sega having a mandate against that again? Because either Sega wasn't paying attention, or they weren't nearly as controlling back in the day. It's interesting that they're using the Fleetway Sonic origin story for Sonic and Eggman in a comic printed in Canada, so it's not just a Europe thing. The writer for SEC probably based it off a Sega lore Bible back in the day, which would mean this was intended to be canon to the games too. But yeah, Kintobor, who has a much less eccentric design than SEC with his hair, explains that he plans to siphon the evil of Mobius into the Chaos Emeralds, and then destroy the emeralds afterwards. Oh, that's new. It's still a hopeless plan though, because obviously there will always be evil people born after this, and people will still keep doing bad things, even if his experiment gets rid of all the evil for now. So he didn't think this through at all. It's contrived that he didn't realize this. This backstory is silly, but it's a lot better than nothing. I'd rather have Eggman's evil explained. Just like in SEC, Sonic achieves a super fast speed on the treadmill even before he turned blue, which completely destroys the point of having him start out as brown, because he wasn't a normal hedgehog at first. All the exploding from speed treadmill did was turn him blue, from chaos energy going into him. I could understand if he only ran that fast because of his shoes, but that's not the case. So giving Sonic an origin story is extremely pointless if all it does is pointlessly explain why he turned blue, instead of telling us why he became fast. If he's going to be able to talk, then you might as well have him be born blue while he's at it. We don't even learn where his parents are and how he survived without them. So it's really not an origin story for Sonic. It's not explaining what everyone wants to be explained. And Kintobor gives a bullshit pseudoscience explanation for why the explosion happened. At least unlike in SCC, it makes more sense that Sonic's telling Eggman's origin story to these people, because they wouldn't know it. Oh, I do love that we're told where Sonic's iconic shoes come from. Kintobor made them, so that's why he has frictionless shoes that don't get torn apart when he runs. Kintobor asks Sonic for a hard-boiled egg and a soda later, and Sonic instantly gets it for him after reading a book. Kintobor says that until he finds the Grey Emerald that neutralizes evil, how would he know it can do that? He says that he has to find a way to stabilize the emerald in the machine. Seriously, why does he not have the Grey Emerald when he got the other emeralds just fine? How would he know about the Grey Emerald of the floating island? Archaeology lore, I guess. But then why was the floating island a secret for all that time until it was personally discovered by Robotnik if people could even know about the Grey Emerald's existence? The explosion happening makes way more sense than SCC though. It happens because he accidentally spilled soda on the buttons of the machine, so naturally that caused it to malfunction. In Fleetway, it was much more contrived that somehow he never noticed and threw away an egg that had been rotten in his own fridge for 6 months, and he tripped over a wire with the egg and fell onto the machine, and somehow that caused it to blow up. Here it makes way more sense. So why were they allowed to deviate from this if SCC was merely adapting this story? You know, if the explosion zapped Kintobor with 10,000 volts, wouldn't that just kill him and that's it? Logically, it would be Sonic who would have turned evil from this, because he was near the explosion without being right dead center in it where he would have been electrocuted to death if logic was there. It was such a missed opportunity that we never got to see the good Eggman in Fleetway's evil Sonic Mirror Zone. But we already know what he would have been like anyways, and logically King Sonic must have killed him the minute he had turned evil. Sonic reveals that the rings he's been collecting in the present day are the same ones that were used as containment rings for the machine containing all of the world's evil. And he actually plans to put Eggman's evil-absorbing machine back together. How? He's not an engineering genius. He wouldn't remember exactly how the machine was made. And while I am wondering why Sonic didn't just get Porker to make a machine like that again, but taking extra precautions that time, Porker's so useless in Fleetway that I guess it makes sense he never thought to rely on him for that. He could have absorbed the evil out of Eggman with a machine just like it. But I guess we're supposed to just assume Porker was too incompetent to make that machine himself, and of course he's a coward, so he'd be too scared of getting the same fate as Eggman. At least the civilians are being proactive by saying that they'll help Sonic look for the rings. One of the civilians thinks it's hopeless to fight Eggman, even though Sonic has super speed. And Sonic says it's about time he fried Eggman once and for all, but that's not going to lead to him killing him, so that was a stupid line of him to say. The smart thing for him to do would be for him to kill him because he's absorbed all of the world's evil, but he's got standards. Even though he's right next to the evil explosion, and logically should have been affected by it too. I really hate how the text in the yellow text boxes is harder to read, and I'd have to constantly keep scrolling down to read the issue's pages if I zoomed in. Sonic gets surrounded by badniks later on, and is scared and takes Eggman seriously for no reason considering that every badnik dies in one hit to him. Including these. So what was the point of him being written to be scared? These are hardly action scenes. Sonic spin dashes through a mountain, falls into the water, and ends up in Labyrinth Zone, where he avoids a flamethrower trap and some chompers. Also, apparently Sonic's able to swim. A current sends him into a tunnel opening, and Sonic thinks the water's rancid and gets out of some pink water coughing, holding one of the Chaos Emeralds, and some civilian tells him that Eggman's been dumping toxic sewage here. And yet Sonic isn't doomed to die later on from just being in it, to the point where he had to cough because of it. No amount of rings should have protected him at that point. He would have lost his ring stance that he fell in there, and then he would have gotten sick from the waste because he would have had no rings. A civilian says that Eggman's turned all of our friends into robots, but since by that he means put them inside badniks, that's not turned into. And he shouldn't be talking as if he's friends with Sonic when he's not. He doesn't even have a name. Sonic chases after Eggman in a place indoors with spikes and flamethrower traps, and he lures Sonic into Starlight Zone, which Sonic thinks of as an amusement park for no reason. He goes through it easily and generically, hitting a spring, and then he sees a pig that he calls Porker Lewis in his early design, who's tied up on a conveyor belt being threatened by a buzzsaw. Eggman jumps down on Sonic and slams the Chaos Emerald away from Sonic while he's distracted, and he has to choose between saving the Emerald and Porker. His decision is predictable. I hate that we never learn how Eggman tricked Porker into being in this situation. It would have made more sense if they just left it at Robotnik kidnapped him. But instead I'm wondering how he could have ever tricked him into being on a conveyor belt where he's tied up near a buzzsaw. Did he put a hamburger somewhere as bait? Eggman gets the emerald and flies away with it, and Sonic destroys his Badnik transforming machine. Sonic has a terrible line at the end. He really shouldn't be making egg puns. And that's the end of the story. Well, that was really boring and generic. The only interesting part was that it had the Fleetway origin story for Eggman. And it made a bit more sense because he spilled soda on it, and that made it explode. But again, it was very contrived that Sonic and Eggman even met. And the story was very lazy and generic by Sonic standards. Nothing happened that really impressed me. It was all just a waste of time. At least Sonic went through a lot of different places instead of just Green Hill Zone. So there was actual variety in the settings, unlike in SCC's first issue. But the first issue was more interesting than this.